Thanks, Yoshi. Thanks, everybody. Welcome from Kiev on this afternoon, the 24th of February, 2023. Quite a memorable day for everyone who lives in this country and maybe for the rest of the world. A year ago, this country was attacked out of surprise and in the most fearful way by their neighbor. And ever since is defending against whatever comes. And we had a webinar a year ago because we were all taken by surprise with exactly the same participants like today. And we thought we'd just repeat the same webinar a year after or a year on. And I'll be joined by some of my Jus Laboris partners who were briefly introduced. And while we're bringing this up on the screen, I have next to me, and that's a great pleasure here in Kiev, Valeriya, and we are having a good time here in Kiev, and we'll be talking about that in a moment. Yeah,
sure.
I'm really, really happy we can make that with you. Last year, we were all touched by your initial statements about being an employment lawyer in Kiev, in the Ukraine during that time. And we have the neighbors also next to you. We have Michał from Poland. I'm really happy to have you here, Michał.
Hello. Good afternoon.
Sam from Hungary, who will be joining us today. We have, then we're turning to the UK, and we're having a little bit of a perspective from the UK and the EU, together with David from London. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone.
And then we are crossing the Atlantic again to the other side of the world, and Eduardo will be helping us a little bit with another scenario, which is all bothering us if you have a global look at the world these days. And we'll ask a few questions about the situation in South America as a little bit of a perspective for future discussions. Now, having introduced everybody, Valeriya, I think we all are most fascinated about the fact that we have been when we last spoke. I remember you started the conversation saying, well, you know, I just come from a traffic jam and I'm in my office and there's courts and I go to the employment court, I do employment law. And you told us a little bit about employment law and practicing in the Ukraine, and we could hardly believe it, yeah, because it was in the middle of warfare, basically around Kiev at the time. And we would very much like to know how is life today, a year after. Really.
Okay, thank you, Burkard. I am so happy to be here 1 year later, actually, in the same group doing this webinar. And I will, of course, dive into this question and answer it. But before we dive in, Burkard, I have a question to you, actually, because you are here with me in Kiev, and coming here on this tragically symbolic date, I must say you are a brave, brave man. And I admire your solidarity with Ukrainian people you show. So this is your first visit to Kiev, and I'm sure you had some expectations what you will see here when you come. And are these expectations different actually from what you see here?
Well, if you travel these days, and just for everybody to understand, it takes about 24 hours to get here. It's quite a long trip by train. And I think all your expectations are mainly around security. We had an emergency call on Tuesday together, whether we will do it or not. And we're sitting here basically in a shelter, not only to have safe connection, but also because we didn't know what was going on the 24th exactly, and whether we will be under attack at that moment. So, you know, you're completely concerned about security maybe when you do this. Once you arrive, I must say I have arrived at one of the most beautiful cities I've ever seen. I had wonderful sunshine when I came. Everything is fully functionable. Everyone is going to work, for those who don't have to go to the front lines and fight. You see a nation that is convinced that they will win this war, even though sometimes we ask questions, and we had a debate about this over dinner last night. Heated debate about, you know, my more realistic views and your idealistic views. And so I can tell you everywhere and everybody you talk to is convinced this is about victory and nothing else. It's a long history of this country that we all are completely unaware of, and a desperate seeking of becoming a member, staying and becoming a member of our community, of our European world, our Western world. And we will be talking about this. And so, well, expectations may be zero. Yeah. And what I found here is I can only say, like, for everybody, take your chances, travel here, spend a long weekend here and get to know these people. It's an amazing experience.
Thank you, Burkard.
But now on you.
Okay. So yes, when I was preparing for this webinar, I decided to rewatch what I said last time. And I must say, I was so optimistic, and we all are so optimistic, so enthusiastic, because we had this webinar right after our army had their first victories at Sumy, at Kiev, in Kharkiv, in other parts of Ukraine. So we all thought that this war will be not for long, like a couple of months maybe. And unfortunately, we were wrong about that. But we're still optimistic. As Burkard said, we are convinced that we will have a victory in this war. Nevertheless, the war tries to or knocks at our doors every day with some Russian rockets or drones or blackouts or something else, some tragic events. We still try to live normal life, and that's all thanks to our army, who gives us the possibility to in October, the Russian rocket fell like 100 meters from our office, causing some damage to the building, to the business center, to the neighboring buildings, to my alma mater university as well. And a lot of people were unfortunately killed there, but we are still coming to work, to our office. If there is a air raid alarm, we are going to the parking underneath the building and are working still from there. We have conferences with our clients from there. Beside that, everything, yes, is functioning. We have a banking system which functions, and restaurants are open. People enjoying their dinners. We have meetings with our clients, lunch and dinners with our clients at the restaurants. We even have meetings at our office, although we are all prepared for these times with the pandemic. We already started we already was prepared for all these online calls, online meetings, and so on and so forth. But I see the deep strive in people to have personal meetings, to talk to each other, to maybe with these conversations to help each other.
You went to court yesterday, so you.
Our courts also are open and function. And yes, yesterday I had a court meeting. Unfortunately, it was shifted a little bit because yesterday in the morning we had a raid alarm as well. Burkard, you heard it?
Yeah.
And when that air raid alarm is, everything is closed. But after that, 20 minutes later, judges are in their cabinets, in their rooms, and the court hearings are happening, and life is like.
And in particular, also I understand the employment law is going on, because even though maybe M&A and other areas may be slightly slower these days, but you still have 1 million people in employment, and you have to fire people and to hire people and to do everything around employment law. Right?
Yeah, that happens every day. And yes, actually, when these are turbulent times, that employment lawyers have much more to work on, because there's so much requests from the clients. And in the first first months, it was like very hard to understand how to operate in these turbulent times, because the company should still work, but on the other side, the safety of people and what to do in case of alarms or in case of any dangerous situations. And there was some companies who were on the territory which was occupied, and employers also wanted to know what to do with that and how to help people there, and whether they have an obligation to help, or they wanted to help. So yes.
And now that I understand, the drafting also is an issue for employers when they have to, I understand, also help selecting people who have to go.
Not selecting actually, but yes, employing companies have an obligation to give these notices for the mobilization, and help the state to hand over this notices to their employees. Yes.
For serving.
For serving. Yeah.
So employment law is very active, but let's look a little bit beyond for a second. This morning in a conversation, someone said a sentence to me that made me think and rethink. That was, after victory, we will have to start integration. And I was a little bit concerned about the word after, because I think, what we actually should be doing is preparing for this immediately. And I'd be very interesting to hear what is your country at the moment doing, and what the company is doing in terms of integrating and, maybe even re-establishing in the Ukraine once the war is over, even though we all don't know when that will be the case. Better start preparing. So what do you hear about this, and what do you see about this?
Yes, of course there is a war, and it's hard to look beyond that and to understand where we should go. But we set the goal actually before the war, and we set the goal in our constitution that we want to be part of the European family and NATO as well. So we have a lot to do about that, and we already doing much. Because on the one hand, we are preparing for to be the part of the European Union. We implementing already a lot of directives, European Union directives, into our employment law, and not only employment law, also into other fields of law. We already implemented a lot, like anti-mobbing, like different employment forms, like 0-hour contracts, and so on and so forth. So, and also our Ministry of Economy has a long list of directives. Some of them are not in our agreement with the EU, but they go beyond. Yes, we go beyond that to be prepared when the time comes, the war ends, and we receive a clear signal from the EU that okay, people, let's start doing something to make it happen. We say we already did all of that, and our legislation is already prepared for that, and we have the same amount of guarantees and rights for the employees and the employing companies as European companies and European employees have.
Yeah. Do you see a certain trend where industry will be in the future, in which part of the Ukraine? Of course, the greater Kiev area, but do you see companies that obviously move away from the war, maybe from the eastern side? So where do they go to? Where, if they relocate, do they go abroad, or do they stay? And if they stay, where do they go to?
Yes, last time I said about relocation program implemented by the state. And it is still on, and many companies enjoyed the possibility to relocate to other regions. Some of them, unfortunately, went abroad, unfortunately, for the safety reasons. but many stayed and relocated to the western part of Ukraine, and this with the help from the state, because they help them with offices, with premises, with relocation. Our state railway company helped with relocating manufacturing companies who had production. So and it's still happening. So many companies are relocating. Ukraine is big.
It's a huge country.
It's huge country.
It takes, just to explain, it takes 7 hours from the Polish border by train to Kiev. 7 hours, you will cross all of Germany, and you're only, if you look at the map, you're not even halfway in the Ukraine. So just to make people understand what a huge country we're talking about. Yeah. So
we have different regions, and for different areas of business. Like agriculture is in the eastern part of Ukraine, and in Kherson, Mykolaiv, Oblast regions, and some other companies who are not in agriculture are in that some other places, and we also have an IT sector. In it's widespread across the Ukraine, from Carpathian Mountains to Donetsk region.
I want to talk a little bit about security, because I think, not only when you ask me about expectation, also what people may think, is it dangerous to do business there? And I want to talk about yesterday's experience, because yes, there was an alarm. First of all, I thought it was very interesting that you are all connected by Telegram to some alert system, and the alert system basically shows you something is going on, even if it's probably very far away. So you get kind of a pre-alarm, and everybody has it, and then you have increased levels of reassurance or not reassurance of what is going on, and whether you should go to the shelter. You are informed. Then I asked you, so if we have to go to the shelter, how much time do we have? And we're like, okay, some 20 minutes, okay, so we don't need to run there. So I think when we think about security these days, we think about a constant threat or a constant attack, which is not the case. It's very chaotic, and at the same time it's very organized. I found this extremely organized, the way you are handling this situation by digital means. So I think there's no real reason to say I cannot have business in this country because of the security reasons. That's at least how I felt about it. Maybe I was lucky on that day, but would you generally agree?
I generally agree. We have a lot of information what is happening. Like, we do not only have this alarm, we also know what is happening. For example, there is an aircraft in the Belarus or Russia, or there are drones, or this is just a spying drone, not the weapon, or something else happens. So we are informed there is an alarm, but we also inform what kind of danger it is, and how much time we have to go to the shelter, or even not decide not to go to the shelter because it's some aircraft in the Belarus. So it's not a threat to.
And I realized also, even if it's very far away, Belarus is not so far away, but it's still far away. You get it on your phone, which I found quite amazing. So it's very organized.
In real time.
So I think people shouldn't be too much afraid of doing business here. And then my second impression was that almost everybody spoke English, and a lot of signals are in English. I even found the exit from the train station after a while, saying exit,
It
was very small, and the taxi drivers speak English, people on the street, in the shops, everywhere. So that is another major advantage for next steps in your country. And the third one, I must say, it's an extreme friendliness and extreme happiness for everyone who's coming. And the hotel was full of foreigners who apparently do business in the Ukraine at the moment. So I think there's no real excuse to say we can't do it here at the moment. Yeah, I found this quite, of course, from our end surprising, because all we see in the media is war. But in fact, you know, it's at least here in Kiev, and it's a huge city with a lot of people who can be employed. It's a huge advantage in the end. So I think it's even ideal investment situations. The only thing is it's difficult to get here. So still no planes. Yeah. But as you were saying, during our conversations, you still have a lot of clients who stay active in the Ukraine and keep you busy as an employment lawyer.
Yeah. Many relocated they people to like Poland and other neighboring countries, and you will talk with Michał about that. But we are connected, and there's so much business to do, so much work to do. We have so many requests, and now because the state introduced a new procedure through which the companies may reserve their employees, and this will also help the companies to preserve their business here. So not all men employees are going to the front line. The company may reserve their employees from conscription, from like enlistment. So it also is helping for the companies to be sure that tomorrow
you still have someone working for you. Yeah, very good. Thank you, Valeriya. We will come back to you by the end of it, but now we'll do a little tour around neighbors, if you don't mind. Yeah,
of course.
And we are turning to Poland first, and I will be asking the same question basically to both our Polish colleague and our colleague from Hungary, but we start with Poland. See, last time we spoke, it was mainly about a huge wave of refugees. I still remember. You know, we had discussions about, are they mainly women? Do they have children? Are they intending to work? Are they intending to stay? So that was our discussion last time. I'd like to understand a little more about businesses. Yeah. And I'm starting with Poland just because, and I didn't know this, I have to say, shamefully admit, how close the Polish language is from the Ukraine language. Having been in Poland for a while, I could understand quite a lot from what you will be talking about. And so it is almost an ideal neighborhood between the Ukraine and Poland, also in terms of having or currently undergoing very similar experiences as a country, as a nation. So maybe give us a little bit of an impression on, you know, is business coming over from the Ukraine to Poland, and will it stay, and how do you experience this after 1 year in Warsaw at the moment?
Sure. So hi again. Burkard, I definitely can confirm what you're saying. There's lots of similarities on the cultural level, but also on the language level. So it's a very good, let's say, relationship and friendship, I would even say, between Poles and Ukrainians, especially these days. Answering your question, obviously, this is also with reference to what Valeriya said. We experience many Ukrainian businesses to come to Poland to settle, to relocate the workplaces. This is obviously for the safety reason. However, I can assure you that if the war comes to an end, majority of the companies, and I also would say that even more than previously relocated, will move to Ukraine. Why? Because the business will always follow opportunities, and Ukraine will be now considered a new Europe. It's been always a part of Europe in terms of culture, in terms of heritage, but now also in terms of politics and the business. So whenever there is opportunity, business will come. And the same happened with Poland in 90s. And especially after joining EU 20 years ago. And the same will happen in Ukraine. So obviously for the safety reasons, employees were located here, but this will change. Also Ukraine, after working also with Valeriya, I can say that it's much more attractive than Poland in terms of taxes, social insurance, all the contributions. So I'm sure business will make the choice to relocate to Ukraine at some point.
Great, yeah. And turning to Hungary for a moment, I know that from the press reporting, quite a lot of companies have been also moving over. Like we're not talking about like the big blue chip companies only. We're talking about mid-sized business, smaller business. In particular, also arms manufacturing that just is being produced maybe just out of the border and then being brought over overnight. How is that from your perspective in Budapest at the moment? So.
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you very much, Valeriya, for that extremely interesting and heartwarming update. I was very, very happy to hear that you're doing well under the circumstances, and also well done to Burkard for taking the trip. So, yeah, I mean, like Michał, we do see a lot of influx of various employees and businesses. And we see in particular in IT services some kind of relocation, both in terms of relocation of Ukrainian operations, but also Ukrainian employees or people who are being employed by Hungarian companies. And there is also actually a government decree in place that incentivizes Hungarian companies to employ Ukrainians. There's a subsidy. It's not a huge subsidy, but it is a subsidy that incentivizes employment of Ukrainians. So we're very happy to support in that way. Other measures include free transport that we provide for Ukrainians. And yeah, so far we've had a lot of about 1.5 million, I think, border crosses, but of course our border with Poland is very, very much smaller than the Polish one, so obviously it's not going to be the same amount of people, and approximately 35,000, 40,000 people are under temporary protection in Hungary, and my impression is that they're doing very well. Also the businesses that you mentioned there, Burkard.
Great. And to both of you, the question, and maybe again starting with Warsaw and then to you, is there anything you would say can be improved from lawmakers, from European lawmakers, anything where you'd say, well, we definitely need this or that? Warsaw first, maybe?
Well, in terms of business or rather on the...
Generally in that situation, but business, of course, if there is, yeah. Mm-hmm.
People level. So in terms of business, it's as usually. If the law becomes simple, comprehensive, and brings an answer to the modern troubles, it helps to everybody. Not only address the current situation with the Ukraine, the war in Ukraine, but generally speaking, and everybody will benefit from this.
Yeah.
And also, obviously, the less stay in the state, this is much better for everybody.
That is a very good statement. I love that. And for you, Sam, in Hungary, is there anything where you say, hey, EU, don't sleep, improve?
Well, what I would like to see is also related to Valeriya's ambition on all our behalves of Ukraine coming closer to the Union, is perhaps developing sort of free trade and establishment regulations to facilitate more ability to do cross-border business. The more of that's possible, I think, the better for cross-border trade, and therefore also for integration and interaction.
Very good. Valeriya, there was something on your mind, yeah, which is completely unrelated to employment law and completely unrelated to business, which you thought like, hey, this is where we really need help, and it's an area where we all maybe not have thought so much about, but it's very important and it relates to your children.
Yeah, we discussed with you regarding help to our Ukrainian children, because unfortunately this war overshadows their childhood, and like more than 1,000 children were injured during this war already, and more than 500 children were killed, unfortunately. And those who are injured, they need a medical support, which they cannot receive here in Ukraine. They are coming to the European hospitals, Israeli hospitals, to the United States as well. And I'm very happy to see that so many people around the world are helping them. I mean, from financial standpoint. So the one point I want you to consider, and all participants today want to consider, to help children, because we elder people can help ourselves, but children is our future of our country. So if there is an opportunity to help some children who need this medical support, it's very important, and we are so grateful to those who already helping with everything. And another point I wanted to discuss is that so many countries are helping us, providing both military and humanitarian support. And I understand that the decision, especially about military support, it is made by the parliaments, by your governments, but without the public support, it won't happen. And I'm so thankful to all European people, to the American people, to the whole world who are supporting us, to regular people who support it, because this will result in more help from the governments. So thank you so much for standing with Ukraine.
Great. Yeah, this is not the end of our discussion, but I thought it's important that in the middle of it, we talk about what you need. Yeah. Because I think all of us, whether it's the law firms who are involved or it's the companies who are listening to us or individuals, I think the children thing, yeah, we can all start to find out in our neighborhood, you know, is there hospitals who have taken on children? Can we do something for these children, entertain them, or do some contributions? I think it's a very nice way forward from this webinar already. Thank you. Now, the UK, that is interesting. Last time, I think we spoke about, you know, the wave of refugees coming to my country, little less coming to the UK, but still. And of course, you're not a member to the European Union anymore, but you're still a member to the European family, and you're an important member to NATO and also to the defense of the Ukraine. Yeah. I have the suspicion that a ship that was sunk by British people, but that is a thing that we will discuss separately. You know, what is your current take if you listen to this discussion from an island which is a little more far away, but, you know, both strategically and mentally very close to what is going on here? Anything you want to throw over the channel into this discussion, please? Yeah.
Sure, and I'll just start by saying how great it is to hear from you and to hear how much life is actually continuing as normal in Ukraine. Obviously, you know, with the disruption that's gone on, it's fantastic to hear that actually people are still thinking about employment law issues in the same as they do in other countries as well. On your question in particular, Burkard, I mean, yes, when we spoke a year ago, I think I was saying I was quite shameful about my country. You know, we had introduced visa processes, for example, for Ukrainian refugees, compared to just saying we open our borders and let people in. Fortunately, the immediate impact, I think, has now been, those immediate issues have now been resolved. There are, I believe, around 150,000 Ukrainian refugees who have come to the UK. I think in terms of sort of the short term, there's been a fantastic integration of people into the UK, but the longer term issues are still there. So, for example, even just in the last week or so, we've seen an increase in reports of homelessness among Ukrainian refugees. So I think there's a constant need in our country, even though we have far fewer refugees than countries like Poland and Germany, to make sure we continue to welcome them, and that it isn't just a case of it was an immediate crisis, but the war is actually still ongoing. So I think your point about, you know, how to keep things in people's minds is very important. You touched on sort of the military side of things, which I don't think is worth going into too much detail. I mean, people see that in the general news. But I think one of the things that is coming out, and I see this both in the UK, but also in the EU, and it's nice to hear that the UK is still seen as part of that European family, is turning towards the long-term reconstruction of Ukraine. And I think we need to draw a distinction here between the short-term support, so immediate military support, immediate economic support. And I know that the UK and the European Union have been heavily involved recently in trying to fund the ongoing cost of the Ukrainian state, to make sure things such as people's salaries can be paid in the public sector, to make sure that essential public services continue. And the European Union in particular has put billions and billions of euros in to help support that. But I think there also needs to be this longer term strategy. And there are efforts in both the UK and in the EU to make sure this happens. But for example, one example that came across my radar was that the European Union is putting 100 million euros in to help reconstruct schools that have been damaged in Ukraine. And I think it's one of those things, and it touches neatly on what Valeriya said about, looking after the next generation of Ukraine's long-term future is going to depend upon there being a thriving economy, having people who have the knowledge and the skills to actually make that happen. And so you can see sort of the European Union as a whole, the estimates vary slightly, but it's something around 70 billion euros the European Union has already committed. Some of it has already gone in, some of it is still going in on an ongoing basis. I think one thing that leads neatly on from that then, and Valeriya even touched on this, is what will Ukraine's long-term position be in terms of European integration? And people will probably have heard, last year, I think it was only a few days after the war started, Ukraine put its formal application in to join the European Union. So that went in on the 28th of February last year. As of the 23rd of June last year, so within a mere matter of months, the European Council gave Ukraine this candidate status. And we've already heard about the efforts clearly outlined by Valeriya earlier about how Ukraine is already getting itself ready so that it can join the European Union at the earliest possible opportunity. Now, there was a council meeting earlier this month at which the European Union itself recognised the considerable efforts that Ukraine has put in, has made to get itself ready. I think there's obviously a slight timing question of how quickly this can happen. I think the Ukrainian, some of the Ukrainian ministers are talking about a 2-year horizon. And I think that there has been some pushback within the European Union on how viable such a quick accession process would be. But I think for businesses more generally, though, what's quite interesting is what more could be done in the very short term that's short of full European Union membership, but actually gives a lot of the benefits. And so there is talk about how Ukraine could be integrated into the single market. And from a UK perspective, I see the impact of being outside the single market in my own country. And therefore, I can really see how valuable that would be for Ukraine if it could be integrated into that single market. And that would back on to other things that have been done in the short term. So, for example, the EU at the moment has waived all tariffs. So any goods being exported from Ukraine into the European Union are now tariff-free. They've removed things like the anti-dumping measures on steel, so that steel can now move more freely from Ukraine into the European Union. And as I see it, these are measures that will help ensure that while Ukraine may not thrive and prosper economically while the war is ongoing, there will still be that base that is maintained during this difficult period, so that when the war does come to an end, Ukraine is in a position then to reintegrate economically as quickly as possible into the wider European economy.
Yeah, this is lovely. Thank you. I think, from what I've been seeing here, I can only concur. Is maybe 3 aspects that the discussions with you and your colleagues brought to light to me. One is, I think we have to start thinking with our clients and within our clients who are listening today about, what will be the future need of business specifically relocated into the Ukraine, and will there be special industrial zones like we had them? For example, I remember when I was in Poland in the 1990s with special tax treatment, special economic treatment. Should we not start thinking about this and start thinking where to establish this? Because you have to build roads, you have to build railroads, you have to think about smaller airports. Yeah, and you have to build hotels. I can only tell you there's wonderful hotels here. Yeah, it's wonderful for tourists, but think alone if there's business people coming at a certain point in time, the capacities you will need from just the basic needs for traveling, yeah, and reaching like industrial spots. The second thing is a very touchy issue, and we spoke about this also yesterday, is, everyone is blaming the Ukraine about being a corrupt country or having been a corrupt country. And, I had to smile about this because, when I came to Poland, it was like more than 50 years ago, that was the same people were saying about Poland. And I don't know about Hungary. So this is traditionally what you're saying about countries who, open up their markets. And I think we can task force in a way of helping the Ukraine to develop methods on, cutting down on any, risks of corruption and talk about it, and don't, not shy away from the issue, but say, this is how we addressed it in our country. This is how we killed it in our country. Yeah, because it's a modern plague, corruption, and it turns down those who are working hard, and it helps those who work nothing. Yeah, so it needs to be attacked now, and we cannot blame the Ukraine endlessly about, but there's still some corruption. Yeah, first of all, there's corruption in every country, and secondly, we have to just turn the coin around and say, this is how we're going to help them. Yeah, and the third thing I think is, don't underestimate the willingness of people to move on. I've been yesterday, your colleague drove me with her car to the cities next to the villages, basically next to Kiev. And we all know the names, the village of Bucha, and I saw basically how fast people is rebuilding their villages, their cities. There's brand new gas stations in the middle of it, yeah, brand new department stores. There were apotheke, yeah, and pharmacies, yeah. So everything that you need for life is already there. You could see German company like Lidl, yeah, with a department store. It's already there. It's rebuilt. Help rebuilding this business. Encourage those who do major food supply, medical supply, to be audacious enough to start testing, coming back to this, or just establishing here, because it's needed, and people is really very, very fast in rebuilding whatever has been destroyed. And I can tell you, if you in 1 year's time you come to the surroundings of Kiev, you will not see, other than some memorial site we've been talking about, yeah, you will not see any traces of the war anymore, because it's amazing to me how fast reconstruction can work if people are dedicated and desperate for making it disappear. Yeah, it's really amazing. Yeah.
On one hand, we are desperate to make the war disappear from our lives, to live normal lives, and on the other hand, it shows our trust in our army, and we trust that they will do everything they could, and maybe a little more, to win and to give us the normal life we are all striving to.
And this army is really innovative. I can tell you that from what I understand now, the major thing in this war was to avoid the Russians from landing on an airstrip next to Kiev, and by simply putting water on the tracks, so it was slippery and they couldn't land.
Yeah,
very simple. So that's how they win wars here. Yeah, and it's nice we're bringing in heavy weapons now, but the innovation has no borders here. It's really amazing. Now, Eduardo, you've been waiting for a long time, and I'm really happy to have you here. The last time we spoke a lot about incoming inflation, if you remember, and you were the ones almost laughing at us and say, hey guys, you're talking about 5 to 10% inflation. I have 30% per day. And we're not talking about inflation again, Eduardo, but
but it has to be. I mean, it's related to the increase of the commodities prices.
Yeah.
We had inflation in all Latin America, but it's controlled in all of the countries, but not in Argentina and Venezuela. Argentina, we are in 100% per year, so it's quite important number. This, of course, has a strong effect in business. Relating to the zone of war, where we were very, very far away, but there's some indirect consequences that we are going through. One of them is the commodity prices. We compete in some sections of the economy with Russia and Ukraine, agriculture, for instance. What was a benefit, the rise of the prices, the climate brought it down, because we are going through a very, very severe drought because of La Nina current. So prices do not benefit us because we don't have the crops that we expected to have. Other countries such as Peru, Bolivia, and Chile, they export other type of commodities, mostly mining, so they are doing better. But there's one thing that was surprising, is that we have the second, in Argentina, we have the second reservoir of shale oil and shale gas in the world. but we don't have the infrastructure. So we are receiving tons of visits of potential investors, one of them from Germany, trying to develop that reservoir in order to export mainly gas to Europe. We are finalizing in June the first part of the pipeline that will permit us to export to Brazil. This is a huge step, and this is happening. But I would like to speak about another side effect. I learned that we have like 400,000 Ukrainian descendants in Argentina, mostly coming between the two world wars. And nowadays, few Ukrainian families are coming to Argentina, but a strong amount of Russian young people. There's supposed to be around 30,000 young Russians in Argentina in the last 12 months. And more significantly, pregnant women. Around 12,000 pregnant women gave birth in Argentina in the last 4 or 5 months. And these people entered the country because you can enter with a tourist visa and without declaring the purpose. It was obviously very visible because some of the women that were entering the country were visibly pregnant, but the migration authorities didn't discover it. And we had to learn about this through The Guardian, a British newspaper that brought the news that this was happening. So some of the young people that are coming, they are fleeing from the war, of course. They are avoiding to be drafted by the Russian military, but they're all staying in Buenos Aires and all going through the public or the private hospitals. And I mean, there's a lack of translators because there's not so many translators from Russian to Spanish. So you can see in some of the selected hospitals some signs in Russian. Schools are beginning to receive all these foreign non-speaking Spanish nor English students. So this is quite a challenging situation. I would say that perspective in Latin America, I mean, economy is not growing at a strong pace. We are expecting a very hard 2023. We have some expectations on energy needs from Europe that this will become maybe a point of interest and a point of investment.
Thank you, Eduardo. And when we spoke earlier, I said I'm throwing a small little stone into your garden to say maybe the next webinar that we are having on a part of the world that needs to be looked into is South America as a total. And we'll certainly be doing this because this also affects all of us. That's the point I want to make here.
South America is Brazil and the rest of us.
Yeah, exactly. Now we have 2 questions actually that came in on the chat, and maybe Valeriya, I think they're all in your direction. You want to see for them for a second?
Yeah. Yes. Rebecca asked not a legal question, but how are you both? So both of us, I think, are all your friends and family okay? Thank you, Rebecca. Yes, fortunately, all of my members of my family are okay. My husband is currently in army. He is first few months he was on the front line, but then he was relocated to Kiev, back to Kiev. He is in a headquarters, something like headquarters. So he is here. I see him regularly, and yes, and because my husband is in army, it was a reason why I stayed here in the first place, because I wanted to support him. So I decided to stay, even though we had all this noises around our house, and it was the front line, which was around Kiev, is not was not very far from our house, so we heard everything. We heard all these noises, especially in the night. We heard this loud boom and bump. Yes, fortunately he is okay. We meet regularly for lunch, for example. He comes home every other weekend, so it's very good. Unfortunately, some of my friends were injured on the front line, and even one friend was unfortunately killed. He was too young for that. He was only 27. He was my fellow student. I was a 6th-year student. He was only first-year student. I had this teaching practice, and I taught him as a practicing student. So I remember him very well. He always had this big smile on his face, and it was a little bit traumatic for me morally. I mean, to accept that something may happen to him. At the first month he sent me some videos from the front line, and I expected that after the war will end, we will meet again, and he will tell me all the stories about how they protected our country from this war. So unfortunately, this also happens. And Burkard,
a second question, no. I can only say, like, if you take this year and you think about one of those fancy extended trips to some of the fancy places which we're all visiting, and we were just going through a few places that are just lovely to go, and we were both saying, like, but they all relate to the past. They all relate to the Roman history or the Greek history or the Spanish history or whatever. And then we go there, and history is actually taking place right here. You were saying this, I'm quoting you. Yeah. Yes. And to see people who are not only in to win, and it's not a question that you're in to win. That's what I understand from this trip. And you said something even more. You said, like, whether or not we have the guts to stand in our societies, you will be standing.
Yes.
And that is till the end. That's very interesting for me to hear this so clearly. And to be part of the European Union, and also to understand the history of this country. I had no clue. I had basically no clue about, what the Ukraine actually is, from my upbringing, from what we learned in school, what we read in our papers. I can tell you, come here, do a guided tour. I did one this morning for an hour and a half, and you will be surprised to learn about what a broad culture this actually is, and has always been, well hidden under whatever ideologic agendas have been put over it. And this has been so for many, many of our cultures. I'm looking towards my friends from Hungary and Poland, just as an example. And the wheels of colonialization are just being moved away, and underlying is a vivid culture. And I think we should all start to embrace it, as that's the most modern word in the Western world, is that we embrace everything and everyone, and we should embrace it and just visit you. Now, you told me when I came, you said, I have a present for you, and you had difficulties to tell me on the phone because you're a woman. Yeah, exactly. But I was very poking into your nose what it is, and it was. And then I thought on the trip, so what would the present be? I should rather me bringing a present, but I understand you thought that I'm the present myself. So
sure.
So you this morning you gave me a present, and I'm just taking it on, and you tell everybody what it is you want.
Okay, sure.
There you go.
Okay.
It's a shirt.
No, it's our Ukrainian.
Oh, the flag.
Yes, it's
This one, you do it. Yeah.
Do you see the sign?
Yeah, perfectly well.
Okay, it's our Ukrainian flag. It has a signature on this flag, and the signature belongs to our defense minister.
Oh, great.
Ukrainian defense minister. So I thought it's a very symbolic present because we received so much support from different European countries and including Germany. So it was like, thank you for all your support.
And thank you for all of you. And I will bring it to our next meeting of Use Laboris, and we'll hang it
Great.
panel.
You know that the color of the flag is the same color of the shirt of a very popular Argentinian club. It's called Boca Juniors.
But it stands for
It's a country in itself.
But this one stands for the grain, the yellow grain, and the blue sky.
Yeah.
Thanks everybody for joining us. Thanks for your patience with us and the technology. I think it worked out. Thanks to the Russians in that case for not making this difficult while we are speaking to you. And thanks for the Ukrainian people who stand up for our freedom. Thanks for everybody. Thank you and bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you.